Hey everyone, today we're diving into the incredible story of how humanity fought back against HIV and AIDS. And it really is a story about a war fought on two totally different fronts at the exact same time. On one side, you had a battle of policy and protest, a fight that took place in the streets and in the halls of government. And on the other, a completely different war was being waged, a microscopic battle of biology and breakthrough, fought deep inside the human body.
To really get this, we have to go back to the beginning. Back in the early 80s, an HIV diagnosis wasn't just a medical problem. It was basically a social death sentence. There was so much fear, so much misinformation. The stigma around the virus was just terrifying, and people who were diagnosed were often just cut off from society.
You know, a crisis like that, one built on fear, it often needs a human face, a story that can cut through all the noise and make people pay attention. And that person, as it turned out, was a teenager from Indiana.
His name was Ryan White. He was diagnosed with AIDS back in 1984 from a contaminated blood treatment. When he tried to go back to school, the school board banned him. Can you imagine? His legal battle just to get an education became this huge national story, and it put a spotlight on the awful prejudice people with HIV were facing. He passed away in 1990, but his fight completely changed the conversation in America.
So, Ryan White's story opened a lot of hearts and minds. But it was the furious, organized, and relentless work of activists that turned that new awareness into actual change. This was the first front in the war, that external battle for new policies, for basic human dignity.
Groups like ACT-UP were just outraged. For them, the FDA's painfully slow drug approval process wasn't just bureaucracy, it was a death sentence. People were dying every single day while potentially life-saving drugs were tangled up for years in red tape. They looked at the situation and decided, nope, we are not going to wait around to die.
And their demands for faster access to experimental drugs created some of the strangest political alliances you can imagine. Get this, on CNN's Crossfire in 1988, the arch-conservative Pat Buchanan actually found himself agreeing with an ACT-UP activist. It suddenly wasn't about left versus right, it was about the right to try anything to stay alive.
And all that pressure, it worked. In 1990, just a few months after Ryan White died, President George H.W. Bush signed the Ryan White Care Act. This was a huge deal. It was a lifeline. It set up this whole system of care. But the most important part was under Title II. It created the AIDS Drug Assistance Program, or ADAP, which meant that people who couldn't afford it could finally get access to life-saving medication.
Okay, so while that massive public battle was raging, scientists were stumbling onto a second, totally different front in this war. It was a quiet battle being fought and won inside the bodies of a very, very small group of people. And it all started with this amazing question. See, for most people, HIV would just wreck their immune system. But doctors were noticing a tiny number of people who were infected, but they just weren't getting sick. So the question became, what if the human body already had the blueprint for how to defeat this virus?
They called this group elite controllers, and they are incredibly rare, less than 1% of all people with HIV. The amazing thing is, without taking a single pill, their immune systems could fight the virus down to undetectable levels and just hold it there for years. This was a bombshell. It was living proof that long-term control of HIV was biologically possible.
I mean, the difference is just night and day. In a typical infection, HIV just goes wild, destroying these crucial immune cells called CD4 T-cells. But in elite controllers, the body's own first response team, the innate immune system, was actually winning the fight. It was keeping the virus locked down, and the T-cell counts perfectly normal.
You can imagine the light bulbs going off in labs all over the world. This discovery totally changed the game for medical research. The question was no longer just, how do we treat this? It became, how do we copy what the elite controllers are doing and give that ability to everyone?
And the secret, it turns out, was in their genes. A lot of these elite controllers shared a rare genetic mutation called CCR5 delta 32. Okay, here's a simple way to think about it. Imagine the CCR5 gene creates a door handle that HIV needs to grab to get inside an immune cell. Well, this mutation basically removes the door handle. The virus can float up to the cell, but it literally can't get in. This discovery, this missing door handle, led directly to a medical miracle. In 2007, a man named Timothy Ray Brown had both HIV and leukemia, and he needed a stem cell transplant. His doctors did something brilliant. They found a donor who had that rare CCR5 mutation.
The transplant essentially gave him a brand new HIV-proof immune system, and his HIV disappeared. He became the Berlin patient, the first person ever to be functionally cured.
So you have these two fronts, right? The external fight for access and the internal, biological search for a cure. And together, they've brought us to this amazing moment where we have incredible control over this virus. But, and this is a big but, that control is incredibly fragile.
I mean, just look at the progress in treatment. Because of the activists who fought for faster drug approvals, we went from those horrible, toxic drug cocktails of the early 90s to today, where many people can manage their HIV with a single pill a day and live a long, healthy life. The scientific progress has just been astounding.
But here is the terrifying reality check. The best science in the world doesn't mean a thing if the political and financial systems that deliver it suddenly collapse. UNAIDS put out this really stark report modeling a scenario where, in early 2025, the single biggest international donor for the global HIV response just pulls out, all at once. The entire system for delivering these drugs is just thrown into chaos.
And the result? It's catastrophic. According to their models, if that funding disappears for good, we could see an additional 6 million new HIV infections by 2029. 6 million. Decades of progress just wiped out by a change in policy.
And that really leaves us with the most important question of all. This whole story shows us that we are smart enough to decode our own biology and engineer a cure. We're passionate enough to change laws and to fight for our fellow human beings. We absolutely know how to control the virus, but have we learned how to maintain the solidarity, the commitment, the will that's needed to actually win the war? That's the part we still have to figure out.